welcome. Good morning if you're in the UK or in Europe. Good afternoon if you're in Turkey. I think we'll have that confirmed in a moment. And welcome if you're watching the recording. We're on our, and I'll do all this hello again in a minute. We are due to start our webinar in 4 minutes time. The topic is training, expense or revenue generator. Is educating your team a smart investment? And if so, how? Okay, so what we're doing now is we're just opening the doors, letting people into the room. We're going to have a quick conversation, a little chat with whoever comes into the room. It'll be a handful of people, just as you might do, I don't know, if you were starting a workshop, for example. So we've got some people in the room already, and it's great to see. This is our fantastic title. By the way, the event is being run by LVG, and they always do LVG Learning, I should say. They always do really good slides. So I'd like to know who your graphics people are at LVG at some point. We should get them introduced to me. Could we just go forward to the question slide? Because I'd like to just ask that of anybody who's in the room right now. So we've got some people who've joined us. Welcome. Could you find, oh, we've got Anne has already said hello. Anne Pierre from the Netherlands. Goedemorgen. I don't know how to say good afternoon in Dutch, so it's lucky that it's still the morning. There's a question here, which I'd love to ask anybody who's just waiting. There we are. Goedemiddag. It's not a Dutch word unless there's a G in it somewhere. What I'd love to ask everybody in the room as we come in, and we're just waiting to start, is how do you know that the training you're doing is providing value? And it could be in travel, tourism, hospitality, whatever, but how do you know that the training is providing value? If you could find the chat function, it's Zoom, so hopefully you're familiar with that. It's the little speech bubble at the bottom. Just click that in chat, answer this question, share your ideas with us. And we're just interested. There's no particular polling. There's no right or wrong answer here. But what we're interested in knowing is, how do you know that your training is providing value? By the way, I've worked in the field of adult learning all my life. This is a question which doesn't go away. In a couple of minutes, we'll start the webinar fully, and we'll have an introduction to the panel, and we'll kick on. But what we'd like to do at the beginning is get this underway. And there are lots of models out there for providing an idea of value. But Anne, if you've already got the chat function open, if you could answer the question, that would be great. And we've got other people joining us from different parts of the world coming in now. So I'm going to take a sip of water. I'd love to see any answers you can put in the chat around what's your technique for knowing that training is providing value. It might be, well, actually, Donald, we're not sure. Let us know in the chat. And I should have introduced myself, by the way. Of course, I'm Donald Taylor, and I'm your host for today. Okay. Well, nobody's answering the question so far, which leads me to think that perhaps people are here because they want to get the answer to this question. Having said that, Anne's come straight in with an answer. Ask the participants. You know what? I love that. I think too often training people like to tie themselves in knots. The right answer is probably ask the participants, build measurements in the training from which you understand, did they get it? And thank you for that. And I look forward to other answers to this question as we go forward. I'm just going to put this question back into the chat, and we're then going to move forward. It's 10 o'clock in the UK, 11 o'clock in the Netherlands and Europe, and we're going to start the webinar. Oh, well, please do keep them coming. You can see everybody else's answers in the chat. I won't read them out just yet because we'll reflect on those after we've introduced our panel. So now it's time to kick on with the panel itself. I'm Donald Taylor. I'm the chair at the Learning Technologies Conference in London, but I'm much less important than our panelists here, who are the people who are bringing the expertise to this event. So we have Tim Fairhurst, who is the Secretary General at the European Tourism Association, ETOA. Ed Gallier, who is the Head of Learning and Development at Jury's Inn and Leonardo Hotels, UK and Ireland. I just felt I should say the whole thing. Ahmed Hancher joins us from Istanbul, CEO of Enokta, the e-learning platform. And Keith Beecham is Director at LVG Learning. Plus, we also have with us Seda Chailak, we weren't sure, Seda, if you were going to be able to be here or not. I'm delighted you are able to be here. There was something you wanted to say right at the beginning, wasn't there? You can hear you'll hear the voice of Seda in a second, and you can see her as well. Seda.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone, for being here today with us. Well, yesterday we received a comment on LinkedIn, so that's why I just want to share small information about LVG and why we are having all white male panelists today at this webinar. LVG was founded by two women, and in our minds and hearts, we value the wisdom. And we know that for thousands of years, humanity suffered enough because of the discrimination and inequity. We also aware of that today. We are at a critical point of change and leap forward. So we hold the responsibility, and we are against all forms of discrimination and inequity by color, gender, language, region, religion, culture, age. So I just wanted to share this information with you all today. And we will continue to talk about diversity and equity in our coming webinars, because our job is education. But more of it, we will work for it. And it's a call of unity for everyone who wants to contribute and who wants to deliver something good for the diversity and equity in every corner of life. Just join us. Let us listen to you, you listen us, and we come together and work together for a brighter future and peace in the world.
Wow.
So thank you again for everyone, and I'm just giving the stage to you then.
Seda Chailak, co-founder and CEO LVG Learning. Thank you so much. Very powerful. I think particularly this morning that really resonates, and I actually felt my hairs at the back of my neck go up listening to you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're going to push on now with the topic we're here to talk about, skills development. But thank you for setting that in the big picture, Seda. I really appreciate it. Skills development, is it an expense or is it a revenue generator? We put our question in the chat here, and in a minute, Keith's going to kick off with a presentation. And I just want to give a shout out to Anne from the Netherlands, who already gave one answer to the question, how do you know your training is providing value? Also, James has put something in there as well, talking about looking at bottom line. So how do we link training right the way through to impact of the business itself? Please, while Keith's talking, if you've got any reflections on what Keith is saying, or you want to answer the question yourself, please go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat area. But now I think probably time to move over to you, Keith, and let's talk through your views. You're going to give us 5 minutes to set the scene for the discussion on this business of skills development. Keith, over to you.
Thank you, Donald. Yes, a couple of minutes just to set the scene. And of course, the subject we're here to debate, skills development, is this an expense or a revenue generator? So, are labour shortages set to damage your business? In January, the World Travel and Tourism Council and Oxford Economics released a report showing a shortfall in the UK travel and tourism of 200,000 jobs. That means 1 in 8 jobs currently remains unfulfilled. One inevitable consequence is rises in pay. In June 2021, City AM, which is a London newspaper, reported wage rises in the sector up to 14%, simply to retain staff. And of course, other sectors are looking at our staff enviously. In December of last year, the London department store Harrods averted a strike by awarding a 25% pay rise. So, is investing in your staff the smart thing to do? And if so, how? Or to put it another way, your business is only as great as the people you employ and develop. Yet, research suggests, this is Business Leader JEP 2022, 81% of UK employees have no written career plan in place with their employer. It would seem, therefore, many firms do not recognise their responsibility to ensure that every member of their team is supported, trained and mentored to meet their company and personal goals. From new starters to veterans, forward-thinking companies realise that productive, motivated staff are critical to success. Do you work with each employee to create training and development plans which contribute to both organisational growth and individual fulfilment and career progression? So what does this look like in practice? Let's start with how to beat the first day nerves. Joining a new company is always accompanied by a combination of excitement and nerves. Before a new starter's first day, are they invited to meet their team members for a coffee and a chat so they know a few faces when they join? On their first day, how are new joiners welcomed into the business? What bespoke orientation program is in place? Will each head of department spend some time with the new starter to explain their role and their teams? Does the starter meet the big boss who can provide an overview of the firm's strategy, values and goals? And an additional benefit is to demonstrate cooperative thinking and working. Working together can only lead to better personal and corporate performance. Do you have a buddy system which partners a new joiner with a member of the team? This builds strong, supportive relationships between colleagues, helps new team members settle in quickly and provides a friendly face. And of course, this gives existing team members the opportunity to develop their own communication and mentoring skills. Are you constantly looking for ways to do things better or more efficiently? Do you offer, for example, learning opportunities, lunch and learn, pizza presentation sessions, etc.? Is your team agile? Are you up to date with the latest trends? Do you bring in external contacts and experts to help your staff in their professional development? Are you able to support professional qualifications and training relevant to the role? Are appraisals undertaken on an annual basis and supported by a mid-year check-in to make sure that employees are on target to meet their objectives? The best firms ensure employees' appraisal is a continuous process and not limited to these few formal meetings. I recall Richard Branson at a Japanese travel trade show saying the most important people for his business were his employees. He said that Virgin tried to go above and beyond to support their staff. Then his company would succeed and beat the competition because valuing staff would mean his customers were happy. For him, skills development wasn't an expense, but a means to enhance revenue. Of course, tourism and hospitality businesses are cash-strapped post the pandemic, but most of the suggestions already mentioned are not a drain on company funds. It's more about a mindset and putting your people first. Your business will be seen as an employer of choice, generating continual productivity improvements. Perhaps I can conclude by quoting former Harvard University President Derek Bock. If you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Thank you.
Keith, that's great. Thank you so much. And I do love that quote. And unfortunately, of course, the people who've tried ignorance are too ignorant to realize that they are ignorant. It's a comfortable position to be in, but not necessarily a very useful one. Thank you so much for setting the scene for us. Please, anybody who wants to contribute, share your ideas and questions at any point, feel free to put your questions into the chat. I've got questions prepared, and we've discussed this with the panel. We're going to put the ideas out to the panel. We're going to discuss things, but feel free to put your ideas, and at any point we may ask questions from the chat into the panel. But let's start off with Ed, and then I'll expand the question to the whole panel. Over the pandemic, as Keith was saying there, training budgets have definitely been cut. Are they going to recover? Is training going to come back? Or if not, what's going to happen? And if they do come back, what will companies focus on? So what's going to happen as we emerge from the pandemic? I'm not asking about juries in necessarily, but generally.
Yeah, I think often L&D budgets are linked to revenue. So as revenues come back, L&D revenues are going to come back. It's not a, they've gone and they won't come back. But I think any time you have a change like this, it encourages you to look at different and more creative ways to deliver the learning. And in hospitality, leisure and tourism, it's not just skills and knowledge. I think it's also learning around behaviours now as well as new people come into the workforce. So I think it's a time of change rather than necessarily, a dark time, something like that.
So you say you've got new people coming into the industry. Presumably there was a loss of staff over the pandemic, and new people are coming in. They can't work from scratch. They do require some training, don't they?
Yeah, I think we're always looking for different pools, of people. But we do, in hotels particularly, people and hospitality, maybe the sector was seen as less reliable than it used to be. Everyone needs to travel, everyone needs a place to stay, and everyone eats food. Unless you're not allowed to travel and stay away, it was the big awakening. So new people are going to give us a try as a sector, as people decided to work in other places, during the pandemic. So it's understanding who they are and building the behaviours that our guests and customers want. Because the one thing that you just can't get away from, and it underpins everything that L&D does, is its human interactions, and really good quality human interactions with guests, customers, and clients, but also colleagues as well. It's a people business.
Right, absolutely. And someone who uses hotels a lot in my travels, I'm always amazed at the quality, what the difference personal interaction makes. And I always remember a hotel in Mumbai, a very tall building. These guys had just finished cleaning the windows, and they were walking past the elevator. And as I walked down the corridor towards the elevator, one of them just stopped, saw I was coming, pressed to call the elevator, and then carried on walking without even thinking about it. I thought that was great customer service from somebody who nobody was going to know whether he'd done that or not. I thought it was a really good example of a person living the brand. Tim, Ed's talked to us about hospitality and how the hotel industry is facing this. In a wider view, in tourism, how do you think we're coming back from the pandemic generally?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for the question. I think in fits and starts is the answer. Just to give one example from outside the hospitality industry, coach drivers. Now, they drive coaches around for tourists. They also take kids to school. But a recent survey of small coach companies in Italy demonstrated they were all at least one driver down. Now, you can't just get a new driver next week. Right. So there really is going to be quite a lot of pressure as demand returns. Can people fulfill that need? And Ed will know fully in the hospitality sector that hotels can't necessarily open all the floors they want, or they're still under constraints as regards how they've been managing public health restrictions, which has caused limits on how do you do breakfast, how do you do other things. Mercifully, those restrictions are falling away, but I think what that's doing is showing us in stark relief that the industry has lost a lot of people because they've had to go and do something else. And I think money will be part of it, but if I could pick up on some of the earlier comments, we really should celebrate what a diverse industry this is. Tourism and transport can give jobs to people with relatively low levels of formal education, very sophisticated levels of education, all ages, people who've got part-time availability, all genders, and so forth. So I think it's great that we had that question as a catalyst to address the point early on. But one of the great things about big picture tourism and travel in Europe is it's around about 12% of employment, and across all of Europe, and that is across all the territory. That's small villages, it's big towns. It blurs with retail, it blurs with all sorts of sectors. So it's ripe for opportunity, and there are lots of young people looking for interesting, human-centered work, and tourism is a very good example of that. We're never going to compete with the some of the high-end professions in terms of money, but this is about, can we compete in terms of how enriching, how engaging it is at a human level. So just on a European initiative, there is the Pact for Skills at an EU level. So that's an initiative kicked off by the Commission last autumn. There's no new money, but money for things like the Recovery and Resilience Funds, Next Generation EU, all the multi-annual financial package through to 2027. All of that is available for developing skills, particularly around the transition for a more digital and green economy. Those are the twin pillars that the EU continues to focus on. There is plenty of money around, and I think one of the opportunities is a more creative public-private collaboration to make sure that firms who are stressed financially have got access to financial support to get some training done.
Quite a lot there, Tim. I might come back to you later on to ask for more details about how we can get hold of some of that money. Like, I'm not suggesting we should necessarily go through you, but I think there's a lot there to unpack and potentially very useful for the audience. Keith, picking up again from Ed and Tim's points here and following on from your presentation, I think Tim's point is a really good one. Look, let's say you didn't do too well at school, or for whatever reason you weren't engaged, but you want to crack on with it now. Is this a good moment? And should we be investing in those people because they're coming in as entrants? We should be employing them in hospitality tourism generally.
Well, the obvious answer to me is yes. I think there's a more nuanced response to all of that, and that is, how important is the investment in people seen at the senior levels of an organization? And that may be a single business owner, or it could be a board of a bigger organization. And I think one of the challenges we have in this area generally is whether this investment is an investment in people, or it's seen as a cost in investment. I've sat around quite a lot of company boards, and a lot of attention has been given to marketing activity and how much money is being spent and what the KPIs around all of that are. And those have been regular discussions at the board. Very few discussions around the people of the business and the investments that the organization is made. And dare I say, when those discussions happen, it's normally because there's a problem with the in a sense, let's call it HR in a very general sense. So for me, part of the question and the answer to the question is about the importance that we are as leaders giving to our people, and the amount of time and attention at the senior levels we're giving to that. Because I think when you come down to an individual member of staff, almost universally, they would say, yes, I want to develop myself. I want to learn more. I want to do my job more effectively, because that's more fulfilling for me as an individual. But it's linking those personal aspirations with those corporate objectives. And I think that's where sometimes we're not really seeing this as an investment opportunity. It's a cost. Oh my God, how much are we spending on training? What? And yet we'll spend £150,000 on an advertising campaign with very little real discussion.
It's a great point. And you're backed up, by the way, in the chat. Rachel Falzon says to everyone, by the way, if you're using chat, please do make sure you do send your chat to everyone so we can all see it. And she says, look, unfortunately, training is still seen as a cost in many organizations, time and money. Tim, would you mind just sending your comment to everybody, because it's absolutely spot on. Tim says the cost of training is one side of it, but the other cost is the cost of replacement recruitment. And it is potentially a huge cost. And I've spent my life in this industry since the 1980s. I absolutely buy this, but it's an issue, isn't it? So I've sat on boards where I've seen exactly those things going on. Keith, how do we shift people's perception at that level, that there are so many things on the balance that training people is one side of it, but the cost of not training them in terms of performance, the cost of replacing them, and the opportunity cost that we're not getting things done right is so heavy on the other side. It should be a no-brainer. How do we do it, Keith?
Well, I wish there was a silver bullet answer. I don't think there is. I think it's the it's turning the words that we use at these senior discussions around. So less about training and development and more about productivity,
right,
and bottom line enhancement. And I think when one is talking to senior managers, board directors, NEDs, and the conversation is around how do we raise the productivity of our organization? How do we get more output for our input? How do we ensure that that bottom line continues to develop and sustain that rather than a quick hit? I think changing the conversation to a productivity conversation will help then drive through the needs then to look at our staff as a critical element of productivity improvement.
What you're saying is generating some chat here. I'm just making sure that everyone sends their comments to everybody. Bingul, I love your comment, but could you send it? You sent it to hosts and panelists. Could you send it to everybody, please, Bingul? Because it's a really good point. And Ed has said the same thing. The learning journey starts at the welcome and the orientation. Making, and this is your point, making sure a new employee feels valued from day one. And after that, as you're saying, Keith, Ed, we'll come to you later on about this, that the point is that it's not really about talking about training. It's much more talking about performance. I used to chair it's now the Learning and Performance Institute. I gave up chairing it last year, but in 2010, when I started chairing it, we decided to change the name from the Institute of IT Training. It was very, very old school. We changed it to the Learning and Performance Institute. We considered just changing it to the Performance Institute because we believed performance was so important. We had to stick with the learning somewhere. Let's talk about technology. Ahmed Hadcher, you're the CEO of eNocta, the platform or a platform in which much learning takes place. And you work with blue chip companies in many sectors and in Turkey and outside Turkey. And what can travel, tourism, the sectors we've got here, hospitality, learn from how things are done outside the sector? Ahmed.
Yep. Thank you, Donald. We have started the learning technology business in Turkey back in early 2000, and since then we had the chance to work with the best of the breed companies in Turkey and around Turkey. And in fact, the tourism industry, the travel industry is very critical. It is part of our lives as humans. I mean, when you have time to enjoy your time in travel, in your, let's say, annual leave time, we go there. The restaurants are a very important part of our life. So in fact, as humans, we're not really aware maybe how important the tourism is in our daily life. I'd like to mention this. So there are lots of hints and tricks that the tourism industry should take from the, let's say, other industries. Like for the last 20 years, but especially beginning with the COVID period, we have seen that the best companies are investing heavily on reskilling and upskilling. You have a wonderful sentiment. Donald Taynor's sentiment is a very, very important sentiment for L&D industry and learning technologies industry. There also you're mentioning that still the reskilling and upskilling is important. Not as important as it was 2 or 3 years ago, because it's now by default. It's by default. It's very important. The other thing that the travel and tourism industry should learn from the other industries is that the collaborative and the social learning is getting more and more important. We are talking about the talent shortage. We're talking about the increasing unemployment rates, as Kate mentioned. What is the solution? Well, the solution is to attract the talent. And how is it possible? According to many surveys, if you are investing in your people, if you're valuing your people, if you're caring your people, then the talent is attracted. The talent is with you. And the other important thing for the industries is you'll get the business results by the people. I think COVID also showed that the performance of the companies definitely rely on not digitalization, not the market, let's say, dynamics, but more and more the human side of the business. We're all now aware of this. So the human side of the business definitely deserve investment in learning. The talent doesn't leave the company if they see there's a there's an investment in their personal development in the company. The talent doesn't leave the company if they see that they are cared by the company. They have enough, let's say, developmental options. They have enough resources to, let's say, realize their potential and reach their edge, reach their potential. They keep the company. And you know what? Well, you need the people to overcome this VUCA. Today, the war started in Ukraine, and the only resource the companies has to manage this VUCA is the people, is the wisdom, is the mind. And all other industries know that it's only done by investing in people more and more. Let's give you an example. Getir is one of the most successful startups in Turkey. It's only 5 years old, and it's all around the world. I think it's in London. Am I right?
I find it really weird. I walk down the street and I see this big Turkish word, getir, on the side of a bus. Exactly.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yep. You know, in the last 5 years, especially with the COVID time, the grocery delivery market is very hot. And as a Turkish startup, they're just fighting against the big, let's say, multinational companies. And how it's possible? Well, there's only maybe one or two answers, but the most important, the answer is, if you ask to Getir management, is investing in people. They are investing heavily in people in order to, let's say, perfect their operational, because operational excellence is very critical for grocery delivery. It has to be in minutes in your home. So it's very important. And the second most important thing is the customer service. It is what that differentiates Getir from the other competitors. So that's why they're heavily investing in learning and development. We provide a learning platform, the learning experience platform, and we develop lots of content. We provide them off-the-shelf content. The platform is similar to the platform LDG Learning is providing to the tourism industry. In fact, when you ask the Getir management, what is if you ask the same question to them, is the training an expense or an investment? They would even refuse to answer this question, because they would say that it's not an expense, it's an investment. And you know what? They don't have a limit in their training budget. There is no limit, which is to say that if there's a need for an investment for learning, do please make a presentation to the management, get your approval, and spend the money. And that's how they're running their business. And secondly, look at Turkish Airlines. All the airlines have big trouble in this COVID time. And one of the most successful airlines in Europe and in the world is Turkish Airlines. And when they ask them how they manage this, they will definitely tell you about how critical role the learning and development plays. They keep the talent. Unfortunately, they have to reduce the wages, but they just talk openly with the people. They invest their abilities. So when the people have the chance to have their, let's say, developmental options there, then they keep the company and get themselves ready for after COVID times, let's say, success. Maybe finally, I can say that one of the other most important thing or critical thing that the tourism industry should learn from others is that people do care about the experience. So the employee experience is very critical. Other than investing in their development, you have to invest them in a wisely and a more, let's say, user experience and an artistic way. People want to do learning like they are watching TV on demand, watching movies on demand, or like they are doing their, let's say, grocery shopping online, or like they're using Instagram. So they want the user experience as they get used to in their life. So that's what the industry should be caring about when delivering, let's say, learning and development. And finally, I have lots of things to share, but maybe the final most critical thing is the mobility and the micro way of learning. People do like learning to be just in time. So when you're doing a work, you need an expert to ask a question. When you're doing your work, you need a place, a portal to just go search and learn. After COVID time, there will be really enough time to go and do classroom training only. You have to find a hybrid way of learning. So when I need information, let me search and find the best information. When I need to ask someone, give me a choice when I just reach the expert and ask them and to learn. that will help the
Yeah.
talent be more productive, more
Yeah.
happy, and the business that's definitely prosper.
Ahmed, thank you. Lots there to pick from, and I love the idea that investment in people leads to better customer outcomes. And I, you know, as a user of services, not working in any of these sectors myself, I totally buy it. I'm always amazed by the fact that airlines have such huge sunk capital costs and investment, but people's view of that has nothing to do with whether a pilot lands a difficult landing or anything else. It comes down to, was the wine chilled to the right temperature? Did I get a smile when I was taken to my seat? So all these things come down to that interface between the customer and the person representing the company. Ed, I want to come back to you. We've got a lot of great stuff coming through in the chat. Thank you so much for that. Please do keep it coming. I would, and put in a great list of things here. Tim's put some really good stuff in also about the resistance from bosses. And Rachel's saying the big boss syndrome is a showstopper. I'm going to come back to some of these when we start with questions in about 10 minutes time. But Ed, I want to ask you, at Juries Inn and Leonardo Hotels, you train people all the time. Do you go for a strict return on investment approach to say, well, we spent this much training them, they produced this much increase in productivity? And if not, what is your measure of success?
Yeah. I'm more in the chat about the big boss and you know that sort of thing. We're a really people-focused organization. The people bit is both the team and the guest. And I'm really lucky with the backing that L&D get. And it is absolutely a cost. Everything is a cost, but it's how you're spending that money. So it's great to talk about the return. But I think some of the sort of ROI, the return on investment metrics can put people off, make it too binary in something that can be, you know, really behavioral led. So if you're talking about great customer service, it doesn't always feed well into an ROI, my personal view. And being challenged for our ROI numbers is not an everyday part of my role as head of learning. But where we do look is as a sector within, you know, hospitality, hotels, travel and tourism. I think we're one of the most transparent sectors where on a minute by minute basis, a good business knows what their guests and customers are thinking. Whether it's reaction to, you know, the rates we're charging on online travel agents, all the way through to during stay when people are sharing Instagram images and Twitter feeds, literally their followers know how they're enjoying their experience before the team does, and then post-stay on guest feedback. And L&D has a really key role in impacting all those feedback sources, and that's really what the C-suite, the exec, are really.
And do you track
in.
that? Do you track that? Is the C-suite aware of those numbers?
When, especially returning, you know, as we sort of unlocked last May from COVID, looking at guest sentiment, and each hotel would look at that on a day-to-day basis. And for example, one of our big challenges was overwhelming volume, actually, you know, especially in the UK, people really wanting that staycation. And we were challenged to provide a great service with reduced headcount. And using the guest feedback, we were looking at where the hotspots were. So was it in certain hotels, we needed to really back up with very quick bite-sized learning around check-in or front office experience. How could we, a big project around housekeeping cleaning, how could we clean safely and efficiently guest bedrooms, and all that was coming direct from the guest. I sometimes think, you know, if the guest makes a throwaway comment on, you know, one of the feedback portals, the impact that they're having, and they really do hold, if not power, great influence in how a business reacts. And a good L&D department should and team should be able to react quickly. So be very sort of, you know, light of foot, have good communication platforms to impact a whole group of hotels. We're about 50 in the UK and Ireland, very quickly. So not taking ages developing content, but getting it out right away.
Yeah.
And then also keeping an eye on the midterm. So yes, be reactionary, but where are the gaps coming? Where do we need to start building that talent pipeline? Because I would say most companies now in travel, tourism, hospitality are suffering from switching off that talent pipeline during sort of the first 12 months, 18 months of the pandemic, because we really didn't know what was going to happen. And as a sector, I think we are good at pipeline building, but some of that pipeline would have left, or the development of that pipeline would have stagnated. So it's about switching all these things on. So I suppose for me, it's a cost, but there's got to be good use of the budget that we're given. And for us, that's always included technology, but it's really interesting around the welcome and orientation and an initial induction period to bring people's skills and knowledge up. We've really tried to find pockets of time where the online and the mobile is delivered by someone and introduced by someone, right? Because we've really found the human interaction of new hires has increased. You can't just go, here's a mobile device, right? Here, you've got an hour a day, crack on and do some learning. It's got to be with that coach and companion. So we use something called team coaches. So people are buddied up in that way. And also, you know, the person that writes my roster, that head of department, they're really powerful, really. They're part of how I'm living my life, and they need to be on board as well with the changing human needs, the behavioural needs of these new hires.
There's a whole lot there, Ed. But I think for me, the thing that stands out, as well as this business building the long-term talent pipeline and the shift in the perception of how people are joining the business and how they probably need more interaction. I've seen that as well, actually, outside tourism and outside hospitality. I think it's a real thing. But I think this business of saying we're not going to focus on a hard dollar return on investment number. We're going to say, look, there are metrics you care about, and we're going to show you that what we do affects those metrics. For me, is the route to winning the battle with the big boss. Tim's raised another one. Tim, you've raised a question in chat. I'm going to ask the question to you because I think it's really important. What if we hadn't done it? And you know, you can definitely say that as Ed is saying, we've got new hotels opening. If we don't do the training now, we can't open the hotel in 6 months' time, so because or however many months' time you've got to get the pipeline ready. That's quite a concrete one. But how else would you be able to answer the question? If we don't do the training, we suffer this loss as a result. Any examples, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one, and travel is increasingly digitalized, and one of the biggest challenges is to make sure, because so many businesses in our ecosystem are small, so you know, it's expensive to buy a new CMS or CRM or whatever you might be. This stuff costs a lot. There are a huge number of products out there. You almost need training to do the RFP. Like, how do I know what I want? Because I don't know what's out there. You know, who's going to coach me through this enormous wealth of people who can say, I've got all the answers for you. But once you've made an investment, you really want to make sure that everyone knows how to use it. And how do you maintain, how do you define what your in-house base level of competence is? And I think one of the risks is that you get early adopters who then just go down the rabbit hole of, oh, it can do this, it can do this, it can do this. And you realize, actually, let's all get to this level. That's going to make us collectively more productive. I know you can generate 36 reports on that. We don't need them. We need this. So I think there's an element of, you know, make systems work for us rather than us become slaves to the system. And that is quite a sophisticated thing to fix and define the related sort of level of training that you need. And how do you keep refreshing people and make it fun? And this will make your job more interesting. It's not just about getting us more money. You will, you know, have more choices in how you work because you've got better tools that you're proficient with.
Also, you'll feel more confident. I remember teaching in the 1990s a bunch of former secretaries who were moving from using manual typewriters to using Microsoft Word version, I don't know, 2 or something, a long time ago. they found it a very intimidating process because they hadn't used this stuff before, and that inhibited their productivity. So it wasn't that the training was a sop, it really helped them feel good, yes, but it actually helped them do the job better. So there's lots of reasons about this. The good approach, of course, the good thing about this approach you're suggesting, Tim, is that if you make this case to the board, you're talking about, or talking a language they understand. We bought this system, it cost us X. We're going to make sure it's productive by ensuring that everybody can use it. And that will cost us, I don't know, 1/100th of X. It won't cost you very much. We'll make sure everyone can use it. And you may well be able to point to a competitor who bought it and didn't train people and is now suffering. So I think the great thing is it does help us pass the big boss problem, which is the phrase that's come up in the chat, and I love that as a phrase. Sundar has asked, amazing comment. I'm going to switch to the questions from the chat. We've got so much coming through, so please keep those coming. Sundar says, I continue to meet the gatekeepers who have so many reasons for not spending money. And yeah, you're not alone, Sundar. This is a fairly common problem. You can see Ed is laughing there. This is something we all recognize. My favorite line has been, why don't you ask your employees if they'd like to get trained or seek larger responsibilities? In excess of 90% of people are willing to be more accountable when they belong to an organization that puts people before profits. I'm going to just ask Keith about this in your general view and your experience in the sector. Do you think we underestimate how much people are ready to learn more, step up, and have more responsibility?
Yes. You asked a close question, but no, just to say a little bit more than that. I think at the employee level, whether that's manager, frontline, new entrant, there is an appetite to have a fulfilling experience at work, and continuing to develop your skills is part of having a more fulfilling time at the workplace, wherever that happens to be. So I think undoubtedly that is the case. I think the challenge then comes is how do we kind of link that personal desire for fulfillment and doing my job better to a way that the manager, and let's call it the big boss, because that's the phrase that we're using this morning. I think it's a nice way of just describing sort of senior management. How do we use the kind of keywords that the big boss gets really turned on by, and it's understanding then, well, what is the corporate vocabulary of this company? What are the words that are exercising? Is it about productivity improvement? Is it bottom line performance? It's understanding the language of an organization and then framing our training and development contribution in those words. Because if we use the words of self-fulfillment for our people, well, that's a bit wishy-washy. What the bloody hell are you talking about there? That's not going to deliver sustainable competitive advantage for us. Okay, right, you're talking about sustainable competitive advantage. Let's now explain how investments in our people will deliver sustainable competitive advantage. So it's about listening to the language that the senior managers use and framing our arguments in that language.
And I think if you don't do that, you're never going to persuade somebody to do what you to take a different path at all. Ahmed, very quickly, we're talking about getting people to use the language of the managers or executives. Have you seen that be successful in operations outside of hospitality and tourism? Have you seen people making a successful case for training outside our field? Ahmed.
Yeah, definitely, Donald. When you start a learning and development project, if you kind of decide the key performance indicators, and if you kind of decide what is the target of this project and link them with the business results, bottom line results, or business strategy, then definitely those projects are more visible and more successful for example, I was giving an example about Turkish Airlines. Nowadays, we're all trying in every L&D project in Turkish Airlines linked with the most important KPI of them, which is to have the flights on time. And second,
Right.
the customer service. So these are the two parameters, two KPIs we're always following and trying to link. The more L&D professionals talk in business terms, the more management or big boss buys the projects, sponsors the projects. And you know what? Definitely the L&D team is more motivated, which leads to more successful L&D projects as well. I can give you one more example. Do you love Pladis biscuits, McVitie's? You like
McVitie's biscuits. I love
McVitie's.
McVitie's biscuits. Yes, I do.
We are working with Pladis,
You can
and
see.
we're providing them a learning experience platform like LVG Learning Experience Platform, the same platform. And there, the most important business KPI linked all L&D project is managing diversity and inclusion. So that is linked to how is that linked to learning and development projects? Well, as L&D teams, we have to work on this topic. We have to spend some time, and you definitely find ways to link them with learning and development. And second KPI we're following with them is how happy the people are from their bosses, how they are motivated. So with 180 degrees, let's say evaluations or different kind of sentiments, we're always following this, and that is always linked to L&D. So I think these are a couple of examples I can share by now.
Thank you, and it's good to know that it is happening and it is possible to do it. I'm scrolling through the chat here and trying to find pick out some of them. Tim has actually answered the question from Sadar, but in case people didn't catch it, Sadar asked ETOAs, the European Tourism Association members are Europe's most important and leading companies. How do they view education? And I'm linking that slightly with the point that Anne made earlier, who she listed a whole bunch of a list of things, but actually has said here that success is not just about hitting the bottom line. It's also, as we saw with Ahmed's examples here, it could be about other things as well, about inclusion. It can be about happiness. So for your members, how do they see education and the technology to support it, Tim?
Well, some of our members are very large organizations like Accor. So, they would have, very significant in-house competence. And I think it's pretty non-controversial to say they've got quite a sort of pastoral people ethos. They say.
Oh, sorry. When you say pastoral,
well, so for example, they suspended their dividend. They set up a distress fund for people who were let go during the pandemic. They
look after people.
Lots of other companies did lots of other positive things. It's just one that popped into my head. So I think a very big organization, the economies of scale permit them to have in-house L&D departments and what have you. We go right down to micros, and 90-odd% of Europe's tourism businesses are micro SMEs, right? So you've got to consider their discretionary budget is pretty limited, and this is where I come back to where are there pots of money available so that there's some support. If you want to upskill your staff, do you have to find all the cost, or is there some funding available that's being through a project being run by your local authority? You've got to be curious. You've got to educate yourself who's doing stuff and what's available, what do you qualify for. But I just want to talk about one unpalatable truth, but we've got to face it, and Keith mentioned it in his slides, is are people going to be attracted? Are people going to stay? And I think the initial attraction, in part, that has to do with salary compensation generally. I was talking to the head of a European national tourism organization recently who'd just been to a hospitality school in that country, and was rather thoughtful when he asked the graduates what do they want to do next, and a lot of people wanted to join the cruise industry, in part because it offered free accommodation. So this was, it was a straightforward economic choice. And the cruise industry's got wonderful opportunities too, but we've got to be clear about our relative appeal. But once people are in, I think this culture of we take an interest in you and we're prepared to invest in you. And I think, my controversial perhaps statement is you've got to take the risk that people will outgrow your organization.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way of putting it. And actually, Marco's just said, often it's cheaper if you're a micro to headhunt people from large organizations than to invest in the education. When I've been fortunate enough to work for large educations, I've taken the view explicitly that it's part of my role to educate people up to do their job as well as they can, knowing that within 2 to 3 years they'll leave because they'll hit the ceiling of their aspiration. There's nowhere else for them to go in the organization, and that's okay. That's the deal. There's an implicit contract almost. Tim, go ahead.
Well, yes, but because I think if you do take that approach, then if it's a small company, so there's no obvious runway for promotion, but if you have a culture of innovation and development, grow the company. I mean, if those people become part of a culture which generates their own opportunities, so their job becomes bigger because they become more capable.
That's a really good way of putting it. And it sort of goes back to Anne's point, saying, look, the need for education needs to be part of a bigger vision, part of the DNA of the organization. If you're looking at a tactical level, like I was, well, we'll train you up to a certain level, then maybe you go. That's one thing. But at a higher level, and it's part of the vision of the company, you might be saying, you're part of our growth, and we're going to keep training you. We want you to stay and keep the people on board to make that growth possible. There was something from Rachel earlier on I wanted to go back to, because I think then we're going to go to the wrapping up piece. Rachel is saying, this is about talking with the big boss. Sometimes I pull out the Balance Scorecard, Kaplan and Norton, for discussion. I think if you're not familiar with it, it's a really good tool to use. The idea being you don't, in short, and rather unnecessarily short, it's not just one metric. That's the point. And so you need to have a range of things that people are balanced, are trained, are assessed against. So if you've got managers, make sure that they are being checked against more than one thing. And one of those things should absolutely, for me, be the development of people. My training, she says, is very much focused on emotional intelligence communication, core 21st century skills. Going back to Ed's point about the need for personal skills being the thing that changes everything for organizations in our field. Patrick's just asked one question. I'm going to ask this to you because I think it's a great one and I'd love to know more about it. Tim's already answered. Given the SME landscape of tourism, is there room for a consortium approach which aggregates the collective muscle of the small and medium enterprise? And I had that in my mind, actually, as Tim was talking about micro companies. Could we not collaborate in some way and find the experts and share their expertise? Tim says, yes, those sorts of hubs are explicit in the ambition of the EU Pact for Skills. I tell you what, I'm going to go to the wrap-up question for everybody. So there's a wrap-up question we're going to ask, which is what happens next? What do we do next? So I'm going to ask that question to everybody, and then if we have time, we'll come back and look at that in a bit more detail. Our wrap-up question is, how can companies start training that delivers real value? I'm going to go to Tim first, then I'll go Keith, then Ahmed, and we'll finish up with Ed. So Tim, how can companies start training that delivers real value?
Well, I'm going to dodge the question by saying first they've got to, who's involved in the gap analysis? Right. So I'm very suspicious of anything that's exclusively top down. So I think making sure there's a really collaborative approach in understanding, here's what we, the team, feel we need, and by all means get some external influence to that. But I think if you have a collaborative approach to, this is what we need, we can see that opportunity, that's exciting, like to learn more about that, you've got some buy-in to any subsequent actual work you've got to do do the training and focus on it and make sure you implement the learnings. But I think if it's just top down, you must do this, not much happens quite often.
The value starts with the motivation of the individual to learn. I love that. Keith, how do we get companies to start training that delivers real value?
And you're giving me a couple of sentences in which to answer that question.
2 sentences.
Okay. I suppose it's about, and I'm reflecting on the conversations we've had so far. It's about, I think, linking the employee behavior to the business outcomes, and that then creates an atmosphere to encourage learning. So it's kind of bottom down and top up at the same time. And it's not just what somebody does, it's how they go about it. And I think that's a bit of the Balance Scorecard philosophy as well. And ultimately, celebrating training successes.
It's a really good point. We don't, I don't think, do nearly enough of celebrating success. Do it internally, do it externally as well. There are lots of awards for training probably in the hotel industry and the tourism hospitality itself, but also outside it generally. And if you can go out and win one of those awards, I believe, Ed, you have, haven't you, won some awards in your time? You go out and you can, that shows your organization that this wasn't a one-off. This is actually really good stuff. I'm wrapping up with you, Ed, so you can tell us about that in a minute. But Ahmed, how do companies start training that delivers real value?
I think it's a good idea to show the people where they are in terms of performance appraisal solutions, in terms of their career expectations, their personal potentials, and then ask them where they want to go. Or as the boss, show them where they should go, give just ideas, mentor them, and link learning between point A and point B, and show them in every step how they are progressing to the real target. And this can be done by a personalization of learning methodology, which is definitely supported by and has to be supported by learning technologies and learning experience platforms.
Thank you. I think it's really important. Actually, it was a point that Marco made earlier on, saying that he agreed with your points, Keith, about having a career plan, but said it has to be explicit and shared with employees. So Marco, thank you for raising that earlier on. Otherwise, it becomes a secret thing. But if it's shared, everyone knows, oh, there is a career plan in the organization, and I know where I'm going. Ed, take us home. How can companies start delivering training?
I actually think right away, the first answer is just start. Because there's loads of barriers, whether it's the big bosses, time, budget, whatever it is, just start. And you can start small, go bite size, deliver regularly, because what you're wanting to generate is advocates in the business for what you're doing. So you start with one outlet, one department, and you get them to endorse what you're doing operationally. And any big boss is going to listen to the people on the floor doing the work, facing the guests, delivering the product. So don't put it off. Start small, regular, bite size, and really try and find people that will be your advocates for L&D.
No, I love that as a motivation, because if you go out and you find the advocates, then the next time you do it, it's that much easier and you build momentum.
Yeah.
And if you're focusing on that as one thing for the department, it means you're focusing on delivering value to the organization from the start by having that dialogue, by finding the people where you can really make a difference. That's so good. I can understand now, Ed, why you're an award-winning learning and development person. I knew that for a long time ago. We've had a great discussion. This has been so helpful and valuable. Thank you very much, everyone in the room, for your contributions. It's been really great. We are going to share the materials. The recording and the presentation will go out afterwards. Got a lot of people saying it's an inspiring dialogue. Thank you, and that's very grateful of you. Very, very good of you. Looking forward to seeing you again on the next webinar from LVG, and look forward to sharing that news with you when that will be in the near future. As it is, thanks for coming, and goodbye for now, and goodbye from all our panelists. Panelists, please say cheerio.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.